On my 70th birthday, my family brushed past me like a coat rack. Hours later, the lawyer walked into my living room with the papers that would change everything. The Costco sheet cake sweated under its plastic dome, buttercream roses sliding as the room filled with the blue glow of everyone else's phones. Balloons bumped the ceiling vent, the Bluetooth speaker crackled with someone else's playlist, and my name was never sung. I stood there in my navy dress and old pearls, smiling at backs, at elbows, at the glazed eyes of people I raised. The smell of barbecue sauce and vanilla frosting clung to the air, heavy as the silence when I cleared my throat. No one noticed the candles I lit for myself sputter out. Then came the sound of the front door, firm, deliberate, not a relative's lazy push, and a tall man in a rain-dark suit stepped in, briefcase clicking like a metronome. The chatter wobbled, forks froze mid-air. My daughter Susan's practiced smile thinned, and Michael's jaw worked like he'd bitten a lemon. The lawyer's coat dripped onto the entry rug I crocheted in '89, steam rising from his shoulders, the scent of wet wool and printer ink mixing with the coleslaw. "Mrs. Whitman?" he asked, eyes meeting mine. Not my phone, not my plate. I nodded, and for the first time that night, the room turned toward me. The papers made a soft, dangerous whisper as he set them on the coffee table, right beside our faded Christmas photo. My name is Eleanor Whitman, and for 4 decades I've been the reminder, the chauffeur, the bank, the peacemaker, the woman behind every birthday banner in this house. Tonight, I was the ghost at my own party until the door opened and fate put a spine in my hands. I felt the tremor in my chest steady as I watched their faces cancel the jokes they hadn't finished. There's a particular kind of cold that comes from being invisible in your own living room. It doesn't leave without a price. I didn't raise a family to bargain for attention, so I made a different plan. I'll tell you exactly how a quiet grandmother set the table for this moment. As the envelope slid toward me, I caught my reflection in the TV's black screen. Tired, yes, but not small anymore. The lawyer cleared his throat, the seal cracked, and the air changed, like thunder far off, finding its way home. Fingers drummed, eyes darted, and someone finally said my name, like it mattered. Before we open what those pages meant, for them and for me, know this. Respect shouldn't have to arrive with a signature. If you believe birthdays should come with love, not conditions, subscribe to follow stories like this. He said my name as if it were a full sentence. Mrs. Whitman. No one had said it like that all day. No mom, no ma, no grandma, tossed over a shoulder while walking to the yard. My own name sounded sturdy in his mouth, the way my father used to say it when he passed me the car keys the first time. Eleanor, steady your hands, you've got this. I folded my own hands where they rested on my navy skirt and looked at them as if they belonged to someone else. There were the thin white scars from years of opening boxes at PTA fundraisers, the burn mark from the Thanksgiving in '93 when the oven mitt slipped and the sweet potatoes met my forearm. The old pearls laid cool against my neck, real enough to make me stand up straighter, not from grandeur, but from habit, the way you lift your chin when you're trying to see past taller people blocking your view. He set the envelope down, and the clatter of forks softened. I saw the fingers around my coffee table, my daughter Susan's French manicure, her thumb busy tamping down a notification, my son Michael's hand fisted near his plate, the knuckle whitening, a smear of barbecue sauce I knew he'd forget and rub on my couch. Between them, the lawyer's briefcase clicked once more, like a metronome finding tempo in our living room. Eleanor, Susan started, her smile in place, the one she uses at open houses and school choir concerts. She is very good at smiling in public. Who is this? This is Mr. Klein, I said, shaping the words and feeling the room tilt toward me, if not out of respect, then at least curiosity. He helped me with some paperwork. Michael let out a small laugh, not unkind, the kind he gives cashiers when his card declines and he's stalling. Mom, tonight? Really? That was my son's way. Make light. Keep things easy. He'd done it since he was 10 and broke his sister's snow globe and said, "See? Now it's like the North Pole everywhere." If not for the way his jaw tightened, I might have believed he was amused. I looked at Susan. She always had the prettiest hair growing up, a chestnut curtain I brushed every night after her bath, while she sat on a towel, legs folded, and told me about the girl at school who brought fruit by the foot in her lunch. "You'll have nice things someday," I would say, and blow across her damp scalp to make her giggle. Someday had arrived for her. She wore it like a badge. She had taught herself how to make small rooms look bigger and small problems look smaller. And somewhere along the way, she learned that the easiest way to keep problems small was to keep me quiet. "Can we do the paperwork later?" she asked, her tone gentle and managerial. "We're in the middle of what?" I wanted to ask, but Mr. Klein had already opened his briefcase. The smell of wet wool and copier toner brought me back to every school office I'd ever sat in, waiting for someone to say my child's name. Mr. Klein drew out a neat stack of papers bound with a clip, a blue notary seal winking like a lake in June. He gave me a pen and set the first page in front of me as if he had all night, as if this were the most ordinary thing to do while buttercream roses slid against waxed cardboard. "I'll be brief," he said, and nodded to me as if asking permission. I felt it then, that tremor I'd had all month turn into a steadying line, like the pleat ironed into my skirt. "This is about your mother's estate planning," he addressed the room, but watched me. "We've completed some changes that go into effect today." Estate. The word sounded fancier than our split level on Hamilton Road with the oak out front that drops fat acorns come September. My estate is a house full of casserole dishes with other people's names etched in Sharpie on the bottom because I could never return them in time. A piano dry as old bones since no one plays it anymore. Quilts that hold stories I'm the last to remember. But putting it on paper, calling it an estate, felt like naming a ship. It can carry you where you decide. Changes? Susan's smile had tightened by a thread. "What changes?" Mr. Klein glanced at me again and smiled, just a little. "Eleanor has created a revocable living trust. Her home has been transferred into it. The trust names a corporate trustee, our firm, and reserves full control of the property and assets for Eleanor during her lifetime. She has also executed a new will and—" "Hold on," Michael said, chuckling in that way he does when he wants to buy time. "Mom, a corporate what now? Why would you— We can take care of the house. You don't need to—" "I am still sitting here," I said, and tried to make it sound lighter than it felt. The edges of the room softened and sharpened, like a painter adjusting focus. Mr. Klein continued. "She has also revoked the durable power of attorney signed 2 years ago." Susan blinked, then found something to fix. "That was for your own safety, Mom," she said. And there it was, what she always said when she changed my thermostat without asking or rearranged my spice cabinet into some system that made paprika disappear for 3 months. "We're just keeping you safe, Mom." When she took my car keys last winter because there was ice on the driveway and I had wanted to drive to church early to set out coffee cups, her voice was the same. "You can ride with us, Mom." It was safer, yes. It also meant I had to leave when she wanted to leave and sit quiet while she finished a call in the car outside my own house. "My safety is important," I said. "But so is my say-so." The room didn't quite know what to do with my voice. It had grown so used to my agreement, my gentle eye that smoothed things over like frosting. I had been the reminder, the chauffeur, the bank, the peacemaker, the woman behind the scenes who made sure the green beans were hot at the Thanksgiving table, even when the turkey took longer than planned. Now there was a man with a briefcase and a notary seal saying out loud that I owned my life. The sentences sounded too formal for our living room, with the thrift store lamp and the Afghan my mother started and I finished in the summer after Tom died. But there it was. I had met Mr. Klein at the library, of all places. My cane had clinked down by the return slot, and he'd smiled at me over an armful of tax code manuals. I thought he was a student at first. He had that tired, polite look of people who read for work. When he held the door, he called me ma'am, and it didn't sound like goodbye to the world, but like respect, plain and sturdy. Maybe that's what made me think I could ask him about the little note I'd printed and folded into my purse. Questions about trusts and wills, and what happens when you're tired of being handled like a glass sugar bowl. Everyone moves away from the edge so you don't fall and break. I didn't used to mind being the sugar bowl. When Susan and Michael were small, I liked being needed. I liked making lists for the grocery store and the crock pot and clipping coupons from the Sunday paper with a pair of scissors that used to be for fabric only. I liked knowing exactly when the bus would turn the corner at 3:12 with two little faces pressed against the window. I liked sitting in the bleachers at Little League, knitting and watching for that exact moment when Michael's whole face brightened because the swing felt right even if he missed the ball. I liked making Halloween costumes out of old pillowcases and letting them lick the mixer beaters as soon as I could let go of the bowl without worrying it would tip. The rhythm of our life was steady like a metronome. Church on Sunday with casseroles for the potluck, meatloaf on Mondays, chicken noodle soup when noses sniffled. 4th of July on a blanket near the school with sparklers lit up by careful hands. When Tom had his heart scare in '88, I learned to stretch a paycheck farther than a rubber band. I took a night shift at the hospital registration desk, learning to smile through the glow of fluorescent lights and the beep of machines that seemed to speak a language I could not. I slept when I could, and I packed lunches with notes that said, "Proud of you, and your book report was great, honey," even when I was too tired to read it. I didn't put my name on those lunches. It didn't occur to me. It was enough that they ate. But then Tom died, as quiet as a man like him could, sitting in his chair on a Tuesday evening in March, the TV murmuring low. He had been the kind of husband who wore the same navy suit to every wedding and every funeral because he believed in not taking up too much space. In death, he took over all the space. The casseroles crowded the counter. The backyard filled with lawn chairs and words I didn't remember. All of us standing around the grill as if the act of turning meat could hold off the fact that my children's father was gone. After the last Tupperware container was returned, after the sympathy cards turned into advertisements again, the house settled around us in a new shape. I felt the weight of being the only adult like a winter quilt I pulled up to my chin and decided not to suffocate under. I took in mending for neighbors. I learned how to reset the breaker. I showed up. Mrs. Whitman has also executed a healthcare proxy and updated her beneficiary designations. Mr. Klein's voice drew me back. There are also letters for each of you. Susan's eyes cut to the envelopes. Michael found the corner of his napkin and began to fold it into a smaller and smaller square. "For me?" he asked, softer. "Yes," Mr. Klein said, and passed them. He started with Susan. Her name looked strange in ink on cream paper. I would have written it myself if I thought she'd recognize my handwriting as a soft landing, not as a weakness. When she took the envelope, her eyes flicked up to mine. There was something there I recognized, the girl on the towel with wet hair. For a moment, I saw her bite the inside of her cheek the way she always did when she wanted to be brave. "Mom," she said. Just that. Not an argument. A word that carries everything and nothing. "These are not punishments," I said, because she had been a good girl once, and even now she was a good mother, I believed it. She devoted Saturdays to soccer games and knew the names of her children's teachers. She cleaned her kitchen before bed every night because she felt better waking up to a smooth counter. She was not unkind, she was busy. She learned somewhere that the way to honor her busyness was to manage me too. "I don't want gifts," I said. "I want boundaries." My voice surprised me. The last time I used that word out loud in this house was when we marked the little line on the doorframe for how tall the grandkids had gotten. "Boundary," we joked, as their heads poked up, inches taller each Thanksgiving. Tonight, the boundary was a line on paper and a decision I had made. "This house is mine," I continued, steady. "I am not a venue. I love having everyone here, I do. But you will ask. You will not tell. If I say no, it will be no. If I say yes, you will help me clean up without me asking. If you leave your plates with barbecue sauce facing down on my good linens, I will remind you once. After that, the plates will go in the garage for your next party at your own homes." A small laugh bubbled up around the coffee table, shocked like a hiccup. Someone at the back, it might have been my nephew, snorted. I let the sound hang. Around the corner, the Bluetooth speaker made a small electronic sigh before it cut out. Outside, a car drove by with the bass thumping, a teenager's calendar marking time differently than mine. "Is this really necessary?" Susan asked, her voice holding the lid over something. I thought of the day in January when she had taken my purse, "So you won't have to carry it," then set it on a chair in the kitchen, and then left with Nate and the kids after the Buckeyes game without returning it. The next morning, my friend Lila had to pay for my coffee at the Panera, and I laughed it off until I was home, staring at the drawer where my checkbook used to be. Susan had brought it to her house for safekeeping, she said later, worried about scams. It was easier to say that than to say she didn't trust me with my own money because I buy stickers for my planner or a peach at the farmer's market if it smells like August. I never told her about the morning I stood in the grocery store with a carton of eggs in my hands and a line behind me, and the feeling that I had turned invisible, even to myself. "It is necessary," I said now, and looked at Michael too, because he had his own way of making me smaller. Where Susan's weapon was a smile and a list, Michael's was a shrug, heavy with charm. He had moved back into my basement for a month when the startup job he loved was acquired, and the acquiring company did not love him back. We made up the couch and then the old twin bed from the guest room. He brought down the weights he never used, a tangle of charging cords, and something that whirred late into the night. He was noisy in his quiet, but he thanked me, and that mattered. He meant it when he said he'd figured it out. Then months passed. He forgot to fill his own case of Diet Coke and drank mine. He left a wet towel on the freezer chest. He waved envelopes in the air, asking if I could front him until the end of the week. "I'm giving you notice," I said, reaching for the folder Mr. Klein had prepared with tabs and paper that felt heavier than the kind from our printer. Even my fingers knew the difference between something official and something you print off from a website for free. "You have 60 days. We will find you a place," I added quickly, because I could hear in my own chest the sound of a mother's heart, a room that never empties of its children's footprints. "I will help with the deposit. After that, you will pay your own rent." Michael's smile, that little sideways tilt, slipped, and he sighed, long and theatrical, then caught himself. When he looked at me again, his eyes were soft and very brown and very familiar. "Do you not want me here?" he asked, a child in a man's voice. How does a mother answer that? "I want my basement," I said. The truth landed like a penny in a jar. It wasn't cruel. It was exact. For a moment, the house remembered other parties, ones where my hands moved constantly. My fingers could still tie a helium balloon without looking, could string twinkly lights across the fence without asking for a ladder. At Susan's graduation cookout, I had mixed lemonade until my palms went puckered, and we told the story of the drama teacher who said she had presents. At Michael's college send-off, I lined up hot dogs on foil trays and pretended not to notice when he hugged his girlfriend too long for his grandmother's comfort. On every birthday, my job had been to be air and gravity. Keep it light, keep it grounded. Tonight, I stood like a person with a spine and let someone else pick up the paper plates. "You've also made charitable bequests." Mr. Klein gently returned us to the table. He had those kind eyes that you trust because they do not try to perform trust. The revocable trust includes an education fund for the grandchildren and a donation to the library and to St. Luke's Community Clinic. The library was where I learned to hold my breath inside my body when the house was full of noise. I used to take the kids there and let them sprawl in the children's section while I stood in the stacks and ran my finger along the spines of books I could not take home because there was no time to read. When Tom died and the world got small and then big in all the wrong ways, I shelved books there on Wednesday evenings to feel pages in my hands that belonged to other people's stories. The clinic at St. Luke's was where I had volunteered on Tuesdays, checking in seniors for blood pressure screenings. They called me Miss Ellie and brought me cookies. I didn't mind the name as long as they looked at me. Knowing that a check would come to those places when I didn't need my money anymore felt like placing a loaf of bread on a neighbor's stoop when they have a new baby. Anonymous, but useful. "Why would you give money away?" Susan started, and then stopped. She was counting. I could see the math behind her eyes. She was thinking of her mortgage and the new minivan and college in 10 years for the kids with the freckles I kiss. She was thinking, maybe, of the time she handed me her water bottle at the 4th of July parade and said, "Can you hold this just for a second?" and walked away. I held it for 20 minutes until she came back and smiled and said, "Oh my gosh, thanks. I'll take it from here." "Because it's my money," I said, simple and not mean. "Because people were generous to us when Dad died. Because I want to be that person for someone else. And because I am choosing to be a grandmother who gives her grandkids books and a chance to choose, not just a check when I'm gone that makes everyone fight over the coffee table while the cake dries out." It grew quiet then. The kind of quiet you get when a summer storm stops before you expect it to. The balloons bumped the air vent like a lazy heartbeat. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and stopped. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the one with a rooster on the face and numbers fading in a way that made noon and midnight look similar if you weren't paying attention. I had lived a long time not paying attention to where my own hands were needed. "Mrs. Whitman," Mr. Klein said softly, "would you like me to summarize the rest another day?" "No," I said, and straightened in the chair I bought at an estate sale of a woman I never met who had embroidered a set of napkins I've used every Thanksgiving since. "I want to finish this now." He nodded. He slid each paper across to me, and I initialed like a woman signing for a package at the door. Responsible and practical and a little excited, because sometimes an unexpected box holds exactly what you forgot you ordered for yourself. With each signature, I felt the old shape of my life adjust. My hand didn't shake. It remembered its own handwriting. There is a particular kind of invisibility that arrives gradually. You adjust for your family the way you adjust for a bad knee, a little sideways step at the bottom of the stairs, a little pause before standing, a smile pasted on when the music stretches too long and you'd like a chair. After a while, you forget you are adjusting, and you call it love, because most of the time, it is. You stop asking yourself what you'd like, because it's easier to let the current carry everyone downstream. Until the day you stand very still and feel the water pulling too hard around your ankles and you think, maybe I am allowed to step onto the bank. My step onto dry ground had started earlier than tonight. It started the morning in April when the lilacs out front bloomed, and I realized I didn't know where my passport was. It started in the pharmacy line when the boy in the red vest called me sweetie, and I felt something stiffen in me that wasn't anger so much as a return. It started in the quiet hours after dinner dishes when I opened a drawer and found the list of colleges I'd never applied to because I married Tom instead. Not regret. That is too simple a word. I had a good marriage, in our simple way. But I wrote down Vermont in October on a piece of scrap paper and slid it under the sugar jar. Lila found it 2 days later and looked up at me over her glasses. "What's in Vermont?" she asked, curious like a girl. "Leaves," I said. "Maybe a bed and breakfast by a lake." We made a plan to go in the fall. It felt like pinning something delicate to a bulletin board. The sound of the tack was smaller than the meaning behind it. After Mr. Klein left, when the last of the relatives took their dishes and their blue-tinged faces into the night, when the balloons started to look like deflated moons, Susan stayed behind. She and I have talked in kitchens more than any other room in our lives. It is where we are both brave, though her bravery looks like a clean countertop and mine looks like keeping the kettle on. "You could have told me," she said, not looking at me at first, running a sponge across one small circle of the counter as if the spot needed to be convinced. "I did," I said. "Lots of times. You said you heard me." "I didn't say, you didn't listen. I'll save that for the day when I forget how to say things gently, which I pray never comes. Life gives you enough reasons to be harsh without making extra." She turned and leaned on her hands the way she did as a teenager when she wanted something. "I'm just trying to help, Mom," she said. "I have a lot on my plate. Nate's traveling every week, and the kids' schedules are—" "You're good at plates," I said, keeping my voice soft so she could set hers down. "You always were. You were organizing your sock drawer at 7. I'm not telling you how to run your kitchen. I'm telling you how to treat me and mine." She made a sound in her throat, something between a laugh and a sob, and for a moment we were not mother and adult daughter, but two women standing in the soft hum of the fridge, tired and trying. She bit her lip. "It's just, when you drove after that snow?" "I know," I said. "I know what it scared in you. The same thing that scared in me when you were little and had that fever, and we counted the minutes between doses. Fear makes managers of us," I added. "But I'd rather we be partners." Her shoulders dropped. She nodded, once, like a compromise without a document. "I don't like that guy." She meant Mr. Klein, but perhaps she didn't, not entirely. She liked him well enough. She didn't like what he represented, the end of her automatic say. "You don't have to like him," I said. "You do have to answer his emails. He works for me." She smirked without humor. "He has a pointy face." "He has a very nice wife," I said, inventing her on the spot if I had to, letting Susan's old mischief have a little space so we were not always only the worst version of ourselves. It worked. Her smile flickered. We piled the paper plates into a bag and tied the knot. Michael came in from the garage then, the one he had stocked like a dorm room. He smelled like the oil of a bicycle he never rode. He leaned in the doorway and watched us. 60 days, he said, not quite a question. 60, I confirmed. I'll go with you this weekend to look. He nodded, jaw working as if he were chewing a thought he couldn't swallow. And I'm supposed to call the electric company? His tone got a little crooked at the end. That was the boy in him, the one who never remembered to eat before baseball practice and came home lightheaded and surprised. Yes, I said, and went to the drawer by the phone where I keep the notepad with the pizza place number on the first page and the plumber on the second. I wrote electric and slid it across. He picked it up, looked at it like it was a map. I'm not a failure, he said, quick, not defensive, but like he needed to put the sentence into the room before his sister did. I didn't say you were, I said, looking right at him so he could see there were no tricks. He shrugged, a smaller one. Feels like it. It feels like growing, I said, which hurts. He swallowed, and the room felt softer. I'll try, he said, which was small and brave. After they left, the house exhaled. I turned off the lamps and the kitchen light, leaving the little one above the stove. When my children were small, that light was a beacon and a blessing. It told teenagers sneaking in that there was love and a stern look waiting. It told me when I came home with 2 sleeping kids in the back seat and $52 in my checking account that I'd made it one more day. I stood in its glow and saw my reflection in the dark window. The same woman who had stood by it for years, with different hair and different worries, but the same bone structure and the same stubborn hope. There are people who will tell you that at 70, you should keep your head down and be grateful for whatever attention comes your way. I am grateful. I am also paying attention. There is a difference. It keeps you from shrinking. In my bedroom, the one with the coverlet my mother stitched in a time when women ironed pillowcases, I sat on the edge of the bed and unfastened my pearls. They made that tiny sigh on my collarbone when they come off, the sound of punctuation. On my nightstand were 2 things I had placed there that morning. The photo of Tom in Toledo in '79, brown hair blowing, holding a fish and smiling like he'd won a small battle against the universe, and a brochure with a bed and breakfast in Vermont on the front. The leaves in the picture were showing off, red so red they felt like they'd insist on their own names. Inside was the number of a woman named Lorraine who wrote, breakfast, fresh maple syrup, blueberry pancakes. I had called in the afternoon 2 days ago, my heart hopping, and she answered on the 3rd ring. We still have a room in October, she said. The best one, if you ask me. Faces the lake. I'd like to take it, I heard myself say. I'll be 70 then. She laughed like we were already sharing coffee. Ma'am, the maple tastes sweeter after 70. Ask anyone up here. I lay back and stared at the crack in the ceiling paint, the one I keep thinking I'll fix but also sort of love because it looks like a river on a map. Somewhere down the hall, a balloon bumped the crown molding. I thought of my mother, who left Kentucky for Ohio at 20 and never went farther again. She had hands that could peel an apple in a single curl, a kitchen where the radio was always playing, a marriage that sounded like footsteps and applause in equal measure. She made sacrifices that looked like ordinary decisions, wearing her winter coat another year so we could have new boots, telling my father the roast was plenty when she'd taken the smaller portion. She did not talk about these choices because everyone she knew made them too. And I thought of the sacrifices that took on different shapes in my life. The day I stood in front of a university admissions office with transcripts in a manila envelope, and Tom called from the truck and said, "Can you start at the office for me Monday? We're short." And I said yes, because the "we" in that sentence was everything. The time I sold my piano to pay for braces because smiles last longer than songs. The week I took a second mortgage to keep our house when the plant closed, and Tom was quiet for 3 days, from the kind of shame that eats at a man's sturdy parts. The years I made holidays lovely, with stockings and oranges and hot chocolate while to-do lists sat in my lap, so traditions could be done by the time anyone else woke up. I am not sad about those choices. They were made with love in hand. But love does not require self-erasure. I know that now. When I woke the next morning, the light was different, clearer in that way fall sometimes hints at even in late summer. The house smelled like sugar and a little like smoke because the grill had been set too high for a minute last night, and we saved the chicken by cutting off the edges and calling it blackened like a restaurant. I poured coffee and stood by the sink and looked at my backyard. It is an ordinary Ohio yard. The squirrel made his careful line along the fence. The hydrangeas drooped their heavy heads in a way that felt familiar. The wind chimes, the cheap kind from the garden center, chimed sporadically like an old friend checking in. My phone beeped. A text from Susan. "Can we talk later? No kids around." That felt like an olive branch or a white flag or perhaps a little of both. Michael had sent a photo at 2:13 a.m. of an apartment listing. It was a studio near the park with large windows. "Too small?" he wrote. "Perfect," I sent back. And then, "Proud of you." He responded with a heart. He has never been quick to text messages back, but he always reads them. That is how our love works, in little red delivered dots. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote the heading "This Week," the way I always have. Under it, I made my lists. Call Lorraine. Confirm October dates. Ask Lila if she wants to drive or fly. Make copies of documents for the file drawer. Set up meeting at the bank. Call a handyman to fix the deadbolt on the back door because it sticks when it rains. After deadbolt, I wrote. Call a locksmith to rekey the front door. Then I crossed it out. Only if necessary, I wrote. This house does not need to become a fortress. It needs to be a home where my decisions stand up on their own, not a place to keep out my children. The boundary is not a lock. It is a line in my voice. Later that day, I met Lila at the coffee shop we favor because the chairs are forgiving and the barista knows we like half-calf afternoon. I told her about last night, and she listened without interrupting the way a good friend does, like she's holding the end of the rope while you climb. "About time," she said, and stirred her coffee with a spoon that clinked like punctuation. "You were always the backbone, now you just get to be the voice too." When I got home, the mailman had left a small stack on the mat. A catalog with women in sweaters pretending not to be cold. A postcard for a church rummage sale I will donate to because you can't have too many mixing bowls in circulation. A letter from the clinic with a photo of Mrs. Sanchez, whose blood pressure I'd taken, standing under a banner that said, "Thank you, volunteers." In the corner, in a hand I didn't recognize, someone had written, "Your smile makes Tuesdays easier." I held the edge of the card with my fingers and felt something unclench in my turnings. That evening, as the sun did that golden thing over the oak out front, Susan pulled up in her new van. She came alone. She walked up the path with her shoulders back and her chin up like a woman going into a meeting she can handle, which she probably could. We sat on the porch. For years I had wanted a porch, but made do with 2 chairs by the front door. It was enough. We watched a boy on a skateboard wobble down the sidewalk and recover and act like it was the cool way to stop all along. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for making your party about what I wanted, for making a lot of things that way." She stared at her knees. "I was scared," she said, and then, because she is brave, "I was selfish too." "I know," I said. I've been scared too. For years. Scared if I said no, you'd love me less. We both get to do it differently now. She nodded, tears in her eyes that she blinked back because she had on mascara. We'll figure it out, she said. We will, I said. You and I, we always do. She laughed then, small and real. We talked about the kids' first day of school plans. We talked about the clinic and the library and how I wanted the community to get as much as my family one day because both needed care. We didn't solve everything. There would be a day when she would call Mr. Klein and ask him questions in her voice that sounds like authority and kindness mixed. There would be a day when Michael would text me photos of moving boxes and then call because he didn't know where to buy a shower curtain rod. There would be days when I would be tempted to pick up my old shape again, like a dress you know fits even if it doesn't suit you anymore. I will have to try it on sometimes to remember why I am not wearing it. As the evening cooled, I went inside to get us watermelon from the fridge, the last sweet wedge, and 2 forks. I placed the plate between us and watched my daughter take a bite like a child, juice chasing down her wrist. She laughed, lifted her wrist, bent her head, and licked it clean. "Don't tell the kids," she said, and there she was, the girl on the towel for a second. My heart did its old turn. Later, when she left, she hugged me on the porch, with the porch light showing moths doing their frantic work. She smelled like lavender and something sharper, the perfume she buys because the woman at the mall kiosk told her it reads as competent. She whispered into my shoulder, "We'll celebrate you next weekend, just us." I didn't say no. I said, "Ask me Thursday, I'll tell you then." She nodded, understood. Boundary, even in celebration. We will practice. The papers Mr. Klein left sat on my kitchen table for 2 days before I put them in a folder in the drawer that used to be for birthday candles and is now for things I don't want to forget. The folder is red, so I can find it when my eyes are tired. When I slid the drawer closed, it didn't resist. It felt like the house agreeing with me for once, wood on wood, a sound as normal as breathing. The conflict isn't over. It is not supposed to be, not because we enjoy conflict, but because change makes noise while it settles. I expect to hear murmurs when Thanksgiving comes and someone wants to know if we can do it at 2 instead of 3. And I say, we can, but I'm going to the parade to watch the marching band first. I expect Michael will forget to call the electric company, and I will remind him, and he will sigh, and then he will do it, and then text me a screenshot of the confirmation number with an exclamation point longer than necessary. I expect Susan will catch herself reaching for my purse once or twice, and then pull her hand back like the stove is hot. I expect there will be a conversation about my car and who gets it one day that will make me want to take the bus to spite them all. I am learning to expect my own firmness too, not brittle, just sure. Sometimes I stand in my living room at night when the TV is off and the room is a dark mirror. I see the outline of the couch where Tom fell asleep so many Sunday afternoons, the dent where he would lay his head. I see the coffee table with a scratch from a time a Lego creation collapsed. I see the crocheted rug from '89 holding the shape of our life. I see me now, my shoulders, the line of my jaw, the way my hands rest on my thighs. I practice sliding my name into the quiet. Eleanor, I say, out loud. Not just Mom, not Grandma. Eleanor. It doesn't take anything away from the other names. It adds a floor under them. On a morning toward the end of the week, a thin letter arrived with the logo of the bank in the corner. Inside was a confirmation that the trust account was open, the numbers lined up on crisp paper. I sat at the kitchen table and ran my finger over them like Braille, the story of my choices told in digits. People think the turning point of a story lives in grand gestures, doors swinging open, a man in a rain-wet suit. Sometimes it does, but most change arrives the way seasons do in Ohio. Slowly, then all at once, a maple taking its time and then waking up overnight flaming. The papers were the flame. The mornings since have been the steady warmth. A week later, I called Lorraine in Vermont to tell her I'd be late arriving. I wanted to stop in upstate New York and see a small town where Tom and I once had the best roadside pie of our marriage. She told me the leaves were starting to think about turning. "We're all just thinking about it up here," she joked. And I wrote that down because I want to be the kind of person who notices when thinking turns into doing. I asked if the bed and breakfast had a library, and she said, "Just a little shelf, but you can bring a book and leave one." I have a stack ready by my suitcase now, one for the shelf, one for me, and one I'll leave for the next Eleanor who checks in after I've checked out, who will run her hand across the bedspread and feel not just the weight of years, but the lift of permission. Her own name in her own voice, steady as a hand on a pen. It was almost indecent, the way silence surged forward once Mr. Klein's shoes disappeared on the porch. So much noise had passed through my house in the previous hours. Bluetooth static, forks scraping, relatives' talk trailing like confetti past my ears. But now it spread out flat and bare, a field after the snow melts. You'd think my own name sounding in the open would have made me feel taller. But the reality was smaller, more private, a sort of quivering inside my bones. I moved around the rim of the living room as if surveying damage in the aftermath of a storm. Only the mess wasn't from overturned plates or smudged buttercream. It was the heaviness left behind by all the years I'd let myself be rearranged. Birthday balloons hung slack at impersonal angles, their pale strings brushing against the corners of the ceiling vent. The sheet cake, faceless and damp, waited at the center of the table, mocking with its sliding roses, and not a single slice cut for me. In my hand, I still held the pen Mr. Klein gave me, a plain blue Bic capped at the end. I turned it in my fingers, feeling the raised lines along the barrel. This was the object, this simple 10-cent thing that would come to represent the whole night. It wasn't the pearls, or even the trust papers themselves, shuffled neatly under my left wrist. It was this borrowed pen, loaded with fresh ink, and the certainty that what I wrote with it would outlast the aftertaste of unpaid debts and invisible birthdays. Children, grown, polished at the edges but worn down in the middle, left in pairs and singles, all glancing backward through the kitchen doorway. But no one lingered. Michael tromped down through the garage, only pausing to grab the chips. His chips now, not ours. Susan's shoulders bristled under her raincoat as she forced a cheerful, "Good night, Mom," into the empty refrigerator light. Door frames flickered with their shadows, then shut behind them one by one. The echo of their leaving was honest. No hugs, no singing, no apologies, just the blunt fact of doors closing. Then it was only me and the leftover glow from a forgotten birthday candle. I found myself standing at the kitchen table, eyeing the uneven burn and the stubby wax that drooled onto the saucer beneath it. I remembered when the kids were small, how they'd fight to blow out all the candles, never mind the cake, the singing, any of it. Me. It had been years since anyone fought for the chance to claim a wish in this house. Today, no one had counted for me. No one had hummed the tune. The silence of all these small dismissals pressed in, cold as winter fog on the glass. This was hardly the first time, of course. I could feel the weight of the small degradations in my posture, in the soft ache at the back of my neck, in the way my hands curled in sympathy for every interrupted word. It went back further than this single party. I could count the milestones missed. The Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when Susan held the grandbabies in her lap, her voice polite but clipped, as she vetoed my suggestion to try Aunt Ruth's cranberry relish. "No, Mom. Let's just do it my way, okay?" Or the summer Michael installed a new smart thermostat and changed the passcode without telling me, leaving me to freeze in my own hallway. Then laughed about it when I asked. "Mom, you always keep it at 80. Be glad I'm saving you money." There was the day Michael borrowed my car for a weekend dog-sitting stint across town, leaving me to beg Susan for a ride to church. "And if you're driving, no coffee to go," Susan ordered briskly, already late for her next errand. I nodded and adjusted my purse, embarrassed when the deacon clucked about my tardiness while Susan zipped off before the last hymn. "Can't leave the van running," she shrugged, waving as though I had simply forgotten myself. I thought of that peculiar humiliation, waiting on the gray curb as if I didn't have keys to my own life. All necessary, all for your own good, Mom. But what they really meant was, for our convenience. There were so many moments when I let these things pass, afraid to seem ungrateful, unmotherly, unloved. When Susan organized my kitchen and threw out the bread box I'd used every single week since 1975, "Just clutter, Mom," I'd admired her efficiency, pressed my lips together, and silently rebought a simpler one at the dollar store. When Michael raided my freezer for leftovers, I pretended not to notice the emptiness and told myself it was good they enjoyed my cooking, that I wasn't eating alone. I excused, I softened, until there was no uncleared path left in my own home. But tonight, standing over this cake, I realized the difference between patience and erasure. I could wait out some neglect, but not all of it. This was the birthday I'd turned into a bystander in my own living room, the birthday my children relegated me to a footnote, more function than person. The humiliation was acute, but beneath it simmered the true feeling, anger, edged with grief. The pen, a nothing, an everyday thing, felt heavier in my hand. I pressed it to a napkin, just to see if it worked, and blue lines bled through. Eleanor. The name looked firm and round, not a mother word, not a soft nickname, just me. That's when I knew I was done waiting. I reached for the pile of printed documents on the table and slid them carefully into the red folder Mr. Klein had left. My fingers hesitated over the letters for Michael and Susan. Those letters, heavy with words I never said aloud, burned with all the polite things I'd avoided, truths that sounded much sharper, written in real ink. Dignity, boundaries, wishes, arranged as plainly as laundry lists, but no less important than my last will and testament. I looked around the gutted living room. My house had always been the whirring core of these family events, but only when I was invisible enough not to interrupt their happiness. Why did Michael never ask before inviting friends for the Browns game and leaving buffalo chicken dip smeared across the sliding glass door? Why did Susan's children drop their backpacks in the hallway and leave sports gear in the foyer, turning my careful home into an obstacle course? How often did I clean up after them, smile while they forgot to thank me, wipe their paw prints off the glass, and pretend it was all fine? No more. I wasn't going to tidy up my own absence so neatly again. But what was I to do? Simply standing up, after 70 years of folding myself down, wasn't enough. There had to be an action, something to render all this paperwork meaningful beyond the legal. I looked at the pen again and set it beside a small china bowl on the counter, the one Susan used to hide behind a row of mason jars, dismissing it as too old-fashioned. The bowl had a hairline crack, a history. It was the last thing my mother gave me, and though it no longer safely held soup, I had kept it for sentiment, a tiny rebel act. That bowl would become my anchor. I placed the signed letters inside, one for Michael, one for Susan, one for the grandkids to have read to them one day when they asked why Nana kept a red folder in the drawer. The bowl itself, flawed and stubborn as I was, would sit on the kitchen windowsill. It would serve as a daily reminder, I am still here, shaped by cracks, but holding what I choose. I began to take inventory, not just of cabinets and linens, but of what I wanted to claim for myself. My keys, for one, my own thermostat settings, my permission to buy the fancy note cards at the drugstore instead of waiting for the cheap packs at the CVS sale bin. The plan shaped itself. I would not leave this house. That's what they might expect, a silent surrender, a shrinking down to a spare room in someone else's split level, my teapot wrapped in newsprint, and my photo albums left in a storage tub under a strange basement lamp. No, this was my home, and if I stayed, it would be on my terms. I would set new rules for them, in writing and in practice, with evidence, starting with invitations, not obligations, for all gatherings. Thanksgiving would not be assigned to me, it would be requested. The spare room would not be Michael's limitless extension, but a guest room with calendar limits and rent agreed on in advance. I would say no, sweet but unyielding, when Susan assumed a silent co-hosting role. If plates were left unwashed, they would not magically disappear before sunrise. I rehearsed saying these things, practical and calm, like numbers at the bank. They could protest, they might not understand, but I would not fold. There was more. The pen, small and ceremonial in my palm, demanded execution beyond paperwork. I thought of the charities in the trust, the library, the clinic, and decided my own stewardship would extend there. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I would volunteer again, not just during their spare hours. I would use my time, my choice. And that October trip to Vermont, suddenly it glimmered not as a fantasy, but as a fixed star. I would call Lorraine in the morning, put down my deposit, and buy myself the softest scarf in the shop on Main Street if I wanted. It would be my trip, not an extension of anyone else's plans. Through the window, dusk deepened, the yard shadowed and blessedly silent. I realized with a jolt that I wasn't lonely. I was simply new to my own company, unsure of the contours, but steady enough to learn them. And so, on the first evening of this new truth, I began my plan. At breakfast the next day, I stood in my kitchen and let the sun warm the back of my hands. I set a single place at the counter. I took 2 small slices of the birthday cake, a tradition for all those years when there was never enough for seconds, and put them both on my plate. I poured the strong coffee, black, just how I like it before Susan started watering down mine with almond milk. I ate in the quiet, pausing between bites, truly tasting what I'd made. The phone vibrated with Michael's texts. "Am I still on for next month, Mom?" And Susan's emojis fluttered up, tentative, perhaps looking for cues. I let their messages wait, answered only what I wanted, and left the rest unread. I felt a flicker of guilt, but it washed away, replaced by something steadier. Agency. My plan began with small, visible signals. A week later, when Susan called to ask about using my house as a base for a friend's birthday brunch, "She just loves your china, Mom." I said no, gently. "Maybe next time," I added, "but this month I'm painting the living room and I'd like to keep it tidy." There was a silence, then a clipped, "Sure, Mom," and nothing else. It was not approval, but it was a beginning. Michael, faced with his 60-day warning, began clearing out the basement in slow stints, carting away boxes and grumbling about high rents on the east side. I offered the moving van's number, but made no offers of cash beyond what we agreed. If he forgot to call the utility company, I let the reminder rest between us until he lost Wi-Fi and figured it out himself. Word rippled out quietly. Friends at the library heard I'd set firm rules for my family and greeted me with unspoken admiration. Tiny smiles, a hand on my shoulder, a spare book for me to take home. Mrs. Liu slipped me an extra packet of scone mix at the register, winking, saying, "It's never too late to act like yourself." Lila cheered when I told her I'd booked the Vermont room, declaring, "You finally did it, Elle." I felt as though a door, stuck for seasons, was finally swinging open. Clarity did not lead to easy peace. There were emails, Susan's careful, legalistic questions, Michael's late-night apologies, uneven at the edges. At a rare family dinner, the arguments pressed at the seams, Susan raising her voice about fairness, Michael bristling at being treated like a tenant instead of a son. I listened, I clarified. "I am your mother," I said, steady. "Not your bank, not your housekeeper, not your default venue. If you'd like pie, ask for pie." It was as close as I could come to both forgiveness and a reprimand. When conflict boiled, I held to that cracked china bowl, feeling its cool, fragile curve. It was my history and my declaration. I may carry cracks, but I decide how to hold my life. The climax unfolded, fittingly, at Thanksgiving, a month later. Susan had called, asking, more softly this time, if we could count on my green beans, the only ones the twins will eat. I said yes. But when she asked if I could start the turkey early so she could swing by after soccer, I told her, "No, Susan. Dinner's at 3. The parade is at 11. I'll be on the line with Lila, drinking cider and cheering. If you'd like to come, the couch is open. If not, I'll see you at 3. She didn't argue. At 3 o'clock, my house was quiet and clean, just as I'd set it. I set the table, one place at a time, taking care to place the napkins the way my mother once did. The doorbell rang, and Susan, Michael, and the grandkids all came, blinking in the early dusk, hands full, faces open. They washed their hands, set their plates, and for the first time in years, Susan brought a dish of her own, Sweet potatoes with a pecan crust, still warm from her oven. Michael wiped the table. They did not ask me to clear anything. For the first time, there was laughter in the air that did not stick in my throat. And when it came time for the pie, I carried that cracked bowl to the table with the letters inside and set it at the center, a quiet testimony. "I want you to read these after dinner," I said. "They're letters for later, a Thanksgiving from me to you." Nobody complained, nobody objected. My boundaries stood, quiet and strong, holding space for us all. That night, I realized I had not become someone new. I had simply unwrapped the corners of myself that had gotten folded, crumpled, pressed beneath other people's needs. Standing in the kitchen, clearing the plates that I wanted to clear, not the ones demanded of me, I finally felt the braiding of all the small, determined acts that had delivered me to this birthday. Respect, after all, does not arrive with candles and cake. It arrives each time you name yourself aloud and then wait to be called by that name. Eleanor. Not just mom, not grandma. All of it, firm and whole, steady as the crack down the side of a favorite bowl, present, visible, unashamed. I went to bed that night with the pen and the red folder stacked beside the old lamp, the bulb humming quietly as if warming to this new version of me. For a long time, I lay on my back, hands folded over my ribs, feeling the echo of all those goodbyes and all those years. I remembered every face turned away, each carefully sidestepped effort at gratitude, every time my own name had been treated as an afterthought, a label to stick on an envelope when the holiday cards were handed out. Nothing more. In that silent hour, I said my name again. Eleanor. My own name, unsoftened, without anyone else to take the edge off. The pen, even with its lightness, seemed to press a new shape into my palm. Its click was the snap of a seam ripper across the days of my life, undoing, opening, making space. But what came next was quieter than I expected. It was not a grand parade, no sudden abundance of apologies or a reordering of family lore. It was simply a morning, like any other, but somehow washed clean. The sun streaked in through the east windows, sweet and golden across the kitchen floor. And I made myself toast, real toast, thick with salted butter and a swipe of peach jam left over from a neighbor's August canning. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, the only noise the tick of the rooster clock, and savored every bite. For the next few days, my phone bloomed with messages, each one a pebble dropped in this newly stilled pond. Michael sent a photo of his half-packed boxes, his dumbbells wrapped in a winter coat, his cereal bowls stacked inside one another like the Russian dolls my sister mailed from Kansas the year I turned 50. He texted, "Found my old keychain. I'm keeping it. Hope you don't mind." The one from Myrtle Beach? I looked at the faded dolphin and remembered the endless games of mini-golf, the sunscreen, the ice cream, how young I'd felt. I told him yes, of course he could keep it. Some things belong more to the story than to the house. Susan called, and for the first time her voice faltered, the practiced management gone. "Mom, I just wanted to check in. Are you feeling okay?" she asked. And in the silent beat between her question and my answer, I recognized that she was reaching, not for my purse or my keys or my kitchen, but for me. "I'm well, Susan. I'm just getting used to making my own coffee too strong again," I said, smiling into the phone. "Maybe you could come by this weekend, just to visit." She sounded surprised, but said she would. No errands, no party planning, just a visit. The freedom in that small change made the world tilt ever so slightly toward light. And I kept my promises. No more clearing their plates without being asked. No more letting every small slight pass for the sake of peace that cost me too much. My boundaries were sometimes awkward, like learning to walk in new shoes, a little stiff, but necessary. Michael would catch himself, pausing outside the basement door with his armload of laundry, and look up for permission, not assumption. Susan bit her tongue the second time she asked to organize the pantry, watching my face for an answer. And when I shook my head gently, she simply nodded, hands still. It was not easy. There were nights when the quiet seemed a little too long, when the phone didn't ring, when I caught myself listening for voices in the hallway. There was the urge to call out, to say, "Never mind, forget it, just come in. The door is always open." But I swallowed it, trusting that patience can build a home as surely as sacrifice once did. More days passed. September rolled its golden head toward October, and the leaves out front started their slow, dazzling turn. Lila teased me at our Tuesday coffee. "Look at you. Red folder, pen in your purse, paint swatches in your hand. Going full Eleanor Roosevelt on us." We laughed. There was a lightness in me, a readiness to stretch into something decades in the making. I noticed, too, how small transformations happened everywhere. The bowl, old, flawed, never quite sure of holding soup, sat quietly on my windowsill, not hidden anymore. It caught the morning sun, the hairline crack a catch for light, proof that we are rarely as fragile as we think. Sometimes I placed small notes inside, things I wanted to remember, or wishes, or even apologies to myself for times I had made myself small on purpose. One day, while volunteering at the library, I helped a child print her name on a request slip. She gripped the pencil awkwardly until I covered her hand with mine, guiding her winsome O, her uncertain capital K. As she finished, she looked up and said shyly, "My mom says only big girls can ask for what they really want." I smiled. She's right. And grandma's too. It was a new habit, naming my own wants, even the small, silly ones. I drove to a farm stand and bought a half bushel of Honeycrisp apples, then baked a pie on a Tuesday for no reason at all but delight. I tried a water aerobics class at the rec center and found, to my surprise, that I could still float, still laugh, still make new friends after 70. At church, I took to sitting in the front row again, not to impress anyone, just so I could hear every word and not miss a note. I was stretching into my own space, claiming it as if it were sunlight. That October, I packed my suitcase for the trip to Vermont. Lorraine's voice was warm on the other end of the line when I called to confirm. "Got your room right here, Eleanor, with the lake glinting in the window and hot pancakes in the morning." As I zipped up the case, I tucked the blue pen into the side pocket, a little talisman, a sign I could bring beginnings with me, no matter where I went. Before I left, Susan and Michael gathered at my house. There was no party agenda, no expectation. Susan brought scones and Michael brought a bag of apples. They stood awkwardly in the kitchen, but not distant. We shared coffee, stories, and even laughter. For a while, we did not speak of trusts or letters or boundaries, just autumn, the schools the grandkids attended, the mangled scarecrow in Michael's new apartment yard. It was, perhaps, the most honest meeting we'd had in years. At one point, Susan pulled the bowl off the windowsill, running her thumb along its crack. "You saved this," she said quietly. "I remember you told us once it was too old to fix. Why didn't you throw it out?" I took a breath. Because being cracked and being broken aren't the same. This bowl still does its job beautifully, like me. Michael grinned, low and warm, and even Susan gave a thin laugh, her eyes bigger than before. She put it back, carefully. After they left, I wrote a letter and placed it in that bowl, just for myself. I wrote about forgiveness, about slow learning, about how love built on freedom is worth more than love built on bargaining. I wrote that the house was still home, but so was anywhere I set a clear boundary and dared to stay standing. In Vermont, when I checked into the inn, Lorraine met me with a hug and a story about her own mother. The room was soft, the leaves outside burning every shade of red and orange. I slept with the window ajar and woke early to walk beside the lake, the air sharp and clear. One chilly morning, I sat at the little writing desk with my coffee and the pen, filling a new page of wishes. I thought of my parents, Tom, my children as little ones. I thought of the cracked bowl still holding its place on the windowsill at home, sheltering the tokens of my old life and the promises for my new. There, far from my usual world, I realized I had not lost my family, not even a piece of it. I had only insisted that we reshape ourselves together into something better. Susan called to ask about sugaring season. Michael texted for chili recipes, and not because they needed something done, but because they wanted to keep a thread tied to me. It was different, and sometimes awkward, but real. When I returned to Ohio, it was just in time for the first real snap of frost. The grandkids trooped through the leaves, their cheeks pink, their voices loud and bright. I set a rule: shoes off, jackets on the rack, no snacks on the new rug. They protested, they laughed, but they listened. At dinner, Susan helped plate up salad and Michael rinsed the dishes, humming a tune from his childhood. There was no complaint, no assumption. Just family, gathered by invitation, not by default. And as I cleared the table afterwards, I looked around at my well-lived, gently repainted house and felt, for the first time on a birthday or any day, that I belonged in every corner of my own story. I was not the coat rack, not the background, not the afterthought. My presence was not a condition, it was a gift, both given and received. One evening, just after sunset, as the lights in the street flickered on and the wind tapped at the window, I stood in the living room holding the blue pen once more. My hand was steady as I wrote a card to a friend, just thinking of you. And I let myself rest in that simple, unapologetic act, myself unshrinking. The cracked bowl, the red folder, the pen, they'd transformed from mere objects to gentle reminders of all I had risked and all I had reclaimed. Every day, I found a new reason to write my name, not just in legal signatures or family reminders, but upon the bright, untrampled field of my own life. No one will ever sing my name quite the way I hope, perhaps, but I hear it now, clear, proud, radiant as the October skies above Vermont. I am Eleanor, mother, grandmother, friend, but also myself, whole and visible. On the last day of my trip, as the leaves tumbled in brilliant swirls outside the inn, I thought of the words I wanted my family to remember most, not just for birthdays, but for every new beginning. It's never too late to honor yourself. Every crack is a sign you held, sometimes for others, sometimes for yourself. The only permission you ever truly need is your own. If you felt invisible, or if you're learning the courage to speak your name aloud, I hope my story gives you hope. Share your thoughts below. I would love to read them, truly. If you felt something in these words, please like and subscribe. We are never too old to begin again, and I'd be honored to walk this journey beside you, because the pen is still full of ink and the future, ours to write.